Alright, how's everybody doing? Sure you're all fine? That's what I would say. There we go. This is The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. My sister-in-law sent me this book. Thank you very much, because this is gonna get me a bunch of views, so you know what's up. Thanks, Connie. This book is about a girl named Lauren Olamina. She lives in Robledo, California, in the year, this begins the narrative in the year 2025. So, you know, tomorrow. But this book was published, I should say, in 1993. Anyway, so everything's wrecked. Apparently there's some kind of global warming or some kind of climate change is happening or has happened or whatever. I don't know to what extent the climate change has changed everything, but everything has changed. Our main character, she lives in a neighborhood that's been walled off. There's no city lights at night because I guess no one can afford to pay the electricity for that. So that's just what it is. People save the electricity during the day. It's kind of like bummy, broke down shanty town that they kind of live in, but it's like a nice place. It's like an actual home. Everyone outside of like a walled neighborhood is pretty much like feral human beings, essentially, running around stealing, robbing, and raping and everything. And there's a drug everyone takes, or a bunch of people are outside of like the last vestiges of civilization are taking. On the street it's called Pro, but it's the pyromaniac drug. It's short for pyromania. It makes watching fires better than having sex. So stuff was on fire a lot. And there was a drug Lauren's mother took while she was giving birth to her, which gives Lauren a birth defect called hyperempathy, wherein she can feel the physical sensation of other people when she's looking at them. When she was a child, she could look at someone bleeding, or even someone who was pretending to bleed, and she would bleed because she empathized with the vision, even though he wasn't bleeding. So it's a fiction, fantasy, dystopia book, so that's how the power works in this world, so we'll play it as it lays. Lauren has this she calls it a religion, but it's not a religion, it's more of a philosophy called Earthseed. As she sees the world, it appears to her, these feelings, these thoughts, and she writes them down, and her dream is to spread this teaching to a bunch of people, to start a commune and to change the way the world lives. Sounds fine to me. It's just like her judging everybody. So also shoots herself, even though she believes that all suiciders go directly to hell. What's that all about? She has a boyfriend and her parents work at the college in town, and they leave there once a week, but they go and they bring guns because people kill you for nothing. I really wish during that period she could flesh out the world just a little bit more for me, just a little bit more to make it make sense. But I saw a question from the Book Leo's channel while she was doing something about Reddit questions, and one of the questions was,
characters are more important than plot.
And I have to say I definitely prefer plot driven, because without that, just a bunch of people experiencing stuff, and I can do that in real life. I don't need to live your crappy life. I have an awesome life I could live if I choose to, and I do. So how about that?
Oh, most people are neutral on this? Weak.
Her brother wants to go out and freaking be a man in the world because he's 15 or something. He screws up, he loses the key to the gate, so who knows who has the gate key to the whole neighborhood, and Pops is mad, so he beats the piss out of this kid. So a homeboy goes back again into the hood, and he comes back later, sneaks in with a bunch of money and some candy or whatever, gives his mom some money. I'm not going too deep into all these characters' lives because I don't care that much. If you do, well, that's great, but there's plenty of stuff between how her mother and the son and Lauren and her father, their relationship, because they're all different people and they have different identities, and that plays some part in the family dynamic, but nothing freaking happens except for this. Goes to his baby brothers, here's some candy, woo. And then he sits down with Lauren. She's low-key trying to figure out what are you doing out there? You robbing people? You selling drugs? And he's like, a little bit of both, you know. But what I'm really doing is just reading for these people because no one up there is literate. So they had them read stuff and they improved their life like fivefold. So they just give them that stuff. There's a heavy like parallel between that and like going out in like the hood, I guess, and making money as like a drug dealer, robber, or whatever. You've seen DMX's life story. She's happy because she knows a little bit more about life from the outside. Because she realizes eventually all that stuff outside is gonna come inside, and it's gonna be all bad for everybody. But no one really wants to look at that. They just wanna live in whatever vestige of safety they have in their little community. No one's expecting it to get better. They're just not preparing for the worst. But she is. Anyway, the boy ends up dead. The cops ask his parents to identify the body. It's like all charred up and there's pieces of his skin missing. Like they made him feel it for sure. He was up, so it was his turn. So then one day the dad leaves and he doesn't come back, and so they have to have like a weird funeral for him. And then the pyromaniacs came in and burning everybody, killing mad people. It's a whole horror show. She has to kill one of the pyromaniacs that was on top of her. She had a gun. She has to feel the pain until that person dies. She just like feels herself dying. And she gets up and runs away. And then she finds two others that were by the neighborhood, white kid, black girl. The black girl lived with one of the guys who just would buy people for his harem. So she was in his harem. And the white kid was just a white neighborhood kid. And so the girl that was from the streets, she teaches them, you know, how to live out there, woo-woo. And so they decide they should go north because north, like in Canada, maybe they can find actual work that doesn't pay in food and shelter, which is just an excuse to have slaves, to work them into debt. And then they become debt slaves for the company, and they can do with them whatever they want, which is pretty much what it is all over the country. They head north, and then they start accumulating people into their crew. Lauren shaves her head and passes as a man. She tries to pass as a man. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. There's a black guy and a Latina girl, and they have a mixed baby, and they like help them out. They join the party. Then there's a Denzel Washington looking cat. He joins the party. They save these two white girls who were caught in an earthquake. And then whenever something like that happens, it's like scavengers, right? So scavengers are just hanging around them like they have guns, so they, you know, they use guns too. Like it's really well written. You know, it's a good read, but stuff happens. That's all that happens. Just things. These things happen. And it's really to no end. They just kind of happen. They're just going to skip to the end. Who cares? By the time it ends, there's like a couple of runaway slaves. They both have the hyper empathy too, which is essentially saying that their parents were drug addicts. They have a bunch of guns now, and they just accumulate a bunch of stuff because they grinded, you know. They're attacked by some pyros, and this is, I guess, the climax of the book. Is that there was a fire that was chasing them, I guess. They put wet rags over their faces and the babies' faces, and they just kept walking and into the intense heat and almost scorched and smoked out, and they made it though. And then they go up to this plot of land that Denzel Washington apparently owns, and he was like, he got with the girl, Lauren. Lauren's like 18 at this point, so he's, you know, an old ass man. He's freaking out over the age difference. He's like, my sister and I are up in this plot of land, let's go to this plot of land. But when they go there, it's all ashes and rubble. They got burned out. That's it. They decide they're gonna thug it out up there. Screw Canada. They have enough money and people to rebuild a whole little Earthseed community. So she's like, let's start the Earthseed community right here. It's as good as it gets. So that's how it ended. Not worth the price of admission. I kind of knew how I felt about this book when I got halfway through with it. And then as I was reading the other half, it just kind of underwhelmed me because I expected some kind of resolution to this book and not just like an ending. As I was reading it, it was easy. I was able to digest it. I was looking at it sidelong, but it was easily digestible. It wasn't throwing me any like annoying sentence structures or anything. You know what I'm saying? But the first thing about this book that had me itching was this non-religion religion. Because it's like a bunch of truisms about God is what it is. It's all these like lyrics. Here we go, let's read them up. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And that's the core of her whole belief system. It's like God is change and everything is changing. So you can either be changed or shape God. That's how she says it. And sure, why not? that seems to work fine if you want to explain how you should live your life. But that really is not the substance of religion. You're not actually speaking of the creator or anything. You're speaking of a concept and worshiping that concept, but you're not really worshiping that concept. You're kind of giving yourself the respect to control your own life. But sure, you can throw that up there too, but like, get the man's name out your mouth. That's the long and short of it for me. That's all I'm saying about that. Because I don't want to do that. I don't want to get into that and be like Mr. Theological critic, because that doesn't do anybody any good. Doesn't do me any good anyway. Anywho, she doesn't really even go into the afterlife or nothing. She's just like, oh, the real heaven is in the stars, because we need to abandon the earth because one day the earth will die. She implies that one day the earth will die, and so we can continue on in the stars. So this book is clearly a product of the late 80s, early 90s, and this is why. Like I said, pyro, or pro, it is analogous, I think the word is, to crack cocaine. Is any of you guys old enough to know what a crack baby is? There was this whole thing in the late 80s, early 90s about children whose parents were on crack will be born with terrible birth defects. And once Lauren tells her two homies that she has this ability, the one outside the neighborhood was like, where I'm from, everyone's parents are addicts, and all their babies are just out there with massive tumors and they all have terrible defects. They grow up struck deaf, dumb, and blind, and they just sit there drooling and dribbling, unable to learn, unable to think. This idea that the drugs that people take are causing these insane birth defects is an echo of that fear, taken to the nth degree. Clearly, the other echo from the 80s is the rampant crime increase from the 1960s and 70s, ever since Judge Eric Warren or whatever, well, that guy, ever since he started doing these criminal justice reforms, which made it more difficult for the police to do their job, aka giving criminals rights or suspects rights. There were people getting off of crimes because cops would be doing dirty tactics like getting evidence without a warrant, yada yada. And so from that time into the early 90s, I think, or late 80s at the very least, crime was on a steady incline. By the time this was published, it was at its apex. People my age have only seen decreasing crime rates. I guess that's partly due to the three strikes you're outlaw. When I think about that, I can see how Octavia Butler can create a world where people are so cruel to each other and committing all these heinous acts without any sense that she should explain herself at all or explain the world at all. Yeah, 2 arbitrary stars out of 5. That's right, 2. For a very good book, because it just bothered me that much, all the things that were wrong with it. Sure, if you like that kind of stuff, if you like YA fiction that doesn't explain itself at all and it just tells you stuff about how people feel, fine. Also, another thing that was like a big red flag for me, she has freaking this hyper empathy, right? When they're all attacked by the pyros, she doesn't feel the feeling that they feel when they're around the fire. Why is that? If she has hyper empathy, shouldn't she be able to feel that extra orgasmic feeling that they have from watching the fire burn, since they're on this drug? Maybe not. That would have been some really dope world building, but kind of dropped the ball on that one. So why do people think that this is prescient or that this has anything to do with the times that we live in? Because it just ain't like that out here. What's going on now has got nothing to do with what's in this book. I think what's happening with people in this, and that is that they're taking their own fears of what they feel could happen right now and projecting it into this dystopian landscape, which is so easy to do. Don't do that. Think. History. It's important. That's it, kids. Yeah, bye.